brother Jimmy 3 years ago. He was 17 at the time, and I was 18. A couple months before his death was the closest that we had ever been. We had finally developed a relationship. Throughout our teen years, we didn't get along at all. We got along when we were kids, when we were younger. But once we hit our teen years, my brother started to change. Our parents separated when I was 5 and he was 4. They had a messy divorce. They battled for custody for us, and this tore the entire family apart. Jimmy's teen years were when he started to rebel. He started getting into fights at school, and he was always starting fights at home. I remember coming home one day, and my mom walked up to me and asked him, should I tell her? And I responded asking, tell me what, Mom? My brother looked up at me and told her he didn't want her to tell me. My mom came into my room later on that night, and she told me that the past couple weeks Jimmy couldn't stop crying, that he just kept on crying and he wouldn't stop. I guess my mom ended up telling my dad, and he picked up my brother that day and took him to a doctor. The doctor prescribed him medication for depression. The next few months I saw Jimmy like I had never seen him before. He would randomly come into my room and just sit there. Most of the time he didn't even say anything. He just sat there. Sometimes he would sit there and cry. It was like he didn't want to be alone. For the first time ever, I saw deep sadness in him. I recall coming home one day and seeing him acting very odd. He wouldn't talk to my mom or me, and I could just tell something wasn't right. Later on that night, I remember hearing a lot of loud noises in the kitchen. I had this instinct to run downstairs. When I got downstairs, he had locked himself in the bathroom. I walked into the kitchen and I noticed the drawer where we kept all the knives was open. I knew he had taken one of the knives. That night, I just sat outside the bathroom and I waited until he came out. He did, but he ran up to his room and didn't say a word to me. He never spoke about that night ever again, and neither did I. I told my mom about what had happened, and she started hiding all the knives and anything else she could think of that he would use to hurt himself. Later on that week, we noticed a huge cut on his upper arm. Although I know that it's not my fault that he's not here anymore, I look back at it and I see all the signs. About a month or two later, I was about to leave for a road trip with one of my friends to Vancouver. I was gone for a week. Every time I would call him, Jimmy was very quiet. He barely said anything to me. I guess I thought this was normal for him since he had been acting so different the past few months. The night before I was about to come home, I was shopping in Vancouver. I remember hearing my phone ring and seeing the caller display. It said it was Grey Nuns. This is the hospital in Edmonton. Right when I saw it, I was like, what? Why is the hospital calling me? So I answered it, and it was my mom. She was hysterical. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. She just went off and she said that Jimmy had fell and he had hurt himself. It was my last night in Vancouver. I just stood there and thought to myself, if he just fell, how much could he have possibly hurt himself? Why is she this upset? I just had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. I just knew something was wrong. I got on a flight about 2 hours after that call. I remember sitting on that plane. Nobody was sitting beside me, but there was someone sitting across from me on the other side. I couldn't stop crying. I remember the passenger across from me came by me and sat next to me and asked me what was wrong. After I told her, I remember she kept telling me she was sure he was fine. He was going to be fine. I look back at that and I wish she was right. I wish that what she said was actually the truth, that he was just fine. I got to the airport and my entire family from Calgary was there. I sat down and I watched my mom, tears rolling down her face, tell me that Jimmy had hung himself. The next few weeks are a bit of a blur for me. Jimmy was in the hospital. He was in a coma for a week. All of my family on my mother's side came down to support us. The hospital gave us one of the guest rooms. This is where all the family stayed day and night. I'll never forget waking up numerous times throughout the night to my mom yelling and crying and hearing my family comfort her. The entire week I felt a roller coaster of emotions. I was so confused. I went into my brother's hospital room every single day, but I couldn't get a hold of myself. I just kept crying and crying. It was an intense cry. It was deep, so deep that I could literally feel my heart break. This was the closest we've ever been, yet in a few days he was going to be the furthest he'll ever be. My family and I always had ties to the Indian community. The word of Jimmy's attempted suicide spread throughout the community like wildfire. It was so hard for me because something so private became so public. After being hospitalized for 7 days, Jimmy passed away. I was actually in the room as he started to pass. I just remember everyone around me crying and yelling. I was literally holding on to him for dear life. I started shaking him, yelling at him to wake up. my family had to take me off of him. There was a nurse standing on the other side of the bed, and I just kept asking her if he's dying, but she wouldn't answer me. His monitor then flatlined, and right there, I knew he was gone. After that, I left the room. I wanted to go back in the room after a while. I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to say goodbye to him alone, just me and him, no one else around. Deep down, I just didn't want to let him go. After everything at the hospital with my brother, my life changed really fast. The day he passed, my mom and I moved to Calgary. I no longer wanted to live in that house anymore. That was the house that I lost him in. The next few weeks, I couldn't stop staring at pictures of him. I just wanted to see his face so bad. I was fortunate for my family down in California who sent me a ticket to go visit them that summer. The next few months, I had a lot of anger towards my family members. One of them was my dad. I used to have these episodes, I guess you could call them that, where every 2 or 3 days I would call my mom and I would be so angry. It was like I was blaming Jimmy's death on certain people. I was never left alone that entire trip. My family never once let me feel alone. I look back at that now and I'm so thankful for that. The biggest struggle I had was when I came back to Calgary. I had no friends and I had secluded myself from everyone I knew except for one person, my friend Jen. Right after he passed, I deleted my Facebook, changed my phone number, and deleted my email. I wanted nothing to do with the life I left back in Edmonton. The first year was the hardest for me because I felt like I had no idea who I was anymore. I was so overwhelmed with emotions that I had no control over. I had no control over who I was anymore. During the first year, it was really hard for me to communicate with anyone. I became a very quiet and private person. I actually hated communicating with anyone. I think it was because at this time, I thought that death defined me. It literally took over my life. The next year, I started university at Mount Royal, where I lived on campus, and my mom had moved back to Edmonton. I chose to stay in Calgary because I was known as that girl whose brother had died by suicide in Edmonton. This was the first time that I had no choice but to interact with people. But what I found the hardest wasn't the interaction, but how to figure out who I was after his death. Fortunate for me, no one in Calgary knew about my past in Edmonton. This way, I could share my story with whoever I wanted and the way I wanted. I was blessed to meet 3 people with beautiful hearts. These people have given me a newfound strength and hope. They changed my life. 2 of these people became my best friends. Since the time that these people have been in my life, I have always felt comfortable enough to speak about Jimmy. I never felt judged. I feel as if they felt my pain and my hurt with me. They've been grieving with me. It's like they lost Jimmy too. The third person I met, my boyfriend, has brought a lot of love into my life. I genuinely believe that these people were sent to me because my brother was watching over me. I think the biggest struggle for me has been the roller coaster of emotions that I feel. I wake up every day and it can be the best day or the worst day. Even if I try to keep a positive mindset, the smallest thing can set me off. I've become a very sensitive person. I have this sensitivity to sadness around me. I can't see anyone near me hurt or be put down. It's like I have this compassion for people. I just never want to see anyone hurt or in pain because I've seen what it can do to someone. I personally don't believe that time heals all wounds, but what I do believe is that over time you learn how to cope with your emotions in a way that you can start to live your life. One of the hardest parts about grieving is accepting the reality of the situation. I often find myself thinking, is he really gone? Did this really happen to me? I actually won't ever be able to see him again, kiss him, or hug him. Death is so definite, that's it. Just like that, someone can be gone and you will never ever get to see them again. How is anyone supposed to get used to living their life without their only sibling? How am I supposed to just go on with my life, go to school, go to work, even just get out of bed? It feels like everything revolves around him since he passed away. I'm only 21 years old. When I think about graduating from university, getting engaged, getting married, and having kids, why is the first thing I think of him? Any moments of happiness I get in my life now revolves around him. I want him here to experience all of those things with me. That's how it was supposed to be. He was supposed to be here with me. The biggest battle you have is with yourself. The emotional roller coasters, the mood swings, the deep, painful hurt of losing him is a daily struggle. I always wish I could just have one day or even 1 hour where I didn't feel the sadness of losing him. It's like you're in this deep, dark hole, and no matter what you try to do, you can't get out of it. I remember talking to my boyfriend the other day, and I just sat there and I turned to him and I was like, you know, this isn't a breakup. This isn't a fight or a grudge. This is a death. I will never get over this. This will always be a part of my life, and I just have to deal with it. I have no choice, I just have to. I know that I have many years ahead of me, and I know that I will find a lot of happiness and love in having my own family one day. But I also know that the loss of him, that void I feel, the pain I feel, will never completely go away. There's another struggle, fighting with myself to talk about him. To let people know, yes, I did have a brother. I want to keep his memory alive. I don't want to keep him a secret. I'm not ashamed of him or what happened to him. I want him to be acknowledged. Yet I can't do that. I can't speak about him the way I wish I could. Yes, it's gotten better. I try to talk about him more, but the fact that he died by suicide makes it so hard. I know his memory lives on through me and the rest of our family and his friends. I miss him. I miss him so very much. And as sad as it is, and as much as it hurts, life has to go on. It has to go on. I'm blessed and thankful for having such a loving and caring support system around me. There's a quote I would like to leave you guys with. I find I can relate to it really well. The grief within me has its own heartbeat. It has its own life, its own song. Part of me wants to resist the rhythms of my grief, yet as I surrender to the song, I learn to listen deep within myself. Thank you for listening to my story.